Hey guys, I figured I would attempt to show you my thought process on how I actually build a shadow box for a more unique piece that I'm going to be worried about preservation quality. This one is a printing block from my great-grandfather's print shop in Ashtabula, Ohio. It was the first print shop there. If you follow along on our website's blog, or I think I've done one video on these so far, then you might have like a little backstory on what these were. And I've done some on Instagram as well. So this one says like William Smith and Son on the back. I don't know if that is who was using it before him or whether that's who made this particular print block. But I wanted to make a shadow box for this. So if I was doing things the way I would do them at work, I would have access to deep set picture frames and would be able to build up a shadow box in a picture frame style. I don't have access to that at home. I have a double bevel miter saw and a Dremel. So that's like about it. And then I recently bought this Cobalt glass cutter, having used Toya glass cutters, the pistol grip one, and having used a wall mounted glass cutter that doubles as cutting mat board and foam core and plexiglass. That is not my favorite, but it does do the job. So it says to use kerosene on it, gasoline or diesel. I'm not going to buy those. I don't have them in my house. What I do have is that. And it worked fairly well. There's a bit of trial and error to it. I needed a lot more than I would have liked. And the amount of pressure that I need in order to cut the glass is more than I'm used to exerting with the other glass cutters, but it does work in a pinch. So if you need one that's cheap. So the first thing I did was I measured out my piece, cut my wood, and made a handy little box. It's only glued together right now, it's not stapled. So this is going to go in here like this. And then you can kind of see the obvious problem from the get-go. There is no rivet or channel, neither one, to put the glass in. So I had to stop after cutting the wood and think, do I want to buy a router just to cut these channels out? What could I do in order to handle this problem? Not ready to buy a router, can't afford a table saw. So eventually I happened to realize that I had this hanging up on my wall. It was the perfect size. It had nothing in it. It was something that I had made for a different project and then decided I didn't need it. It has a little bit of artistic design because, you know, we're not going to call that a chip. So this has the rivet for the glass, but it's obviously not deep enough by itself to hold such a large printing block. So now I'm presented with another problem I had to stop and think about. How are we going to get the glass to stay in there? Because on a normal picture frame, the glass is held in through pressure, gentle pressure. You put your glass in, then you put your mat board on top, then your picture attached to the mat board, your foam core, and then you drive framer's points in to hold everything in nice and gently, and the glass doesn't move. So this has the rivet, but I can't use framer points because they'd be lurking on the glass, and I don't have a framer's point gun. They're about as much as a router, so I have to pick or choose which one I wanted. So we recently had a rather unique project come in where the round piece of glass had been cut custom for someone for their picture frame, and the company that did it siliconed it in. So I figure, why the hell not? So that's what all this mess is right here. It's not on accident. It is deliberate. This is all siliconed in. I had clear silicone in the house for repairs around the house. And instead of grabbing that, I grabbed the E6000 and decided to give it a shot. Probably should have gone with the silicone, but this is totally not coming out. Not going to come out. Absolutely. So you see I'm not cheating. Fingers out of the way. Not cheating. That is not coming out. So now I have that situation fixed. So the next step will be to cut a piece of backing, which I will be using wood, and then that will be attached on the back. These two pieces will be attached. These are the completely wrong methods I use when making a shadow box at home. Luckily, when I make them at work, I have access to all the proper tools and it's not so convoluted. Is for my hinges. I went ahead and bought these over at Hobby Lobby. More than I would want to pay for them normally, but I just kind of wanted to get the project done because it was dragging on. And in my WIP pile, they did come with like 4 of them. And at first I was going to put it on like normal, where it opens this way, like a regular door. But I was thinking about the latching system I would have to have in order to like firmly latch it. Did I want to use a magnet or did I want to use an actual latch? And then I realized that, hey, let's just have gravity take hold. If I put it here, then it'll open up that way. And then when it's hanging on the wall, gravity will simply lock it into place. If you do not have an owl, I highly recommend getting one. So I have a ton of screwdrivers, even though this is clearly not a screwdriver. The problem is if I'm not leaving them someplace, somebody else is leaving them someplace. So I have no idea where the hell most of my screwdrivers are. But this drill bit works very well. The press block, because this way I have a very clear top and bottom. Oh no, this is the top, this is the bottom. Probably should have made this the bottom. I think it's errors that you make, like this right here where it's got the lip. It's a little bit better right there. You normally want to put those at the bottom, and people are less likely to see it. But because I used a bunch of scrap wood, I just kind of jury-rigged this whole thing. It's riddled with errors. There you go. You guys forgot what it was. So if you do framing, you probably have random pieces of mat board, which is exactly what you want for this project. Now the whole thing I'm going to show you guys is that we don't want anything on here that can actually damage the wood. You see it has the remnants of some paper. It's written on it probably by my great-grandfather. It's an abbreviation for William Smith and Son. So there's not going to be much we can really do about that. It comes off a little. But when you're dealing with heirlooms, you want to preserve the heirloom. Anything that looks like it could be causing damage can remove. This is actually coming off pretty well. But if it was resisting, we would just leave it, because leaving it is going to cause less damage than forcefully removing it. That might be tape. What do you guys think? That tape? If it comes off, we'll take it off. This goes for pictures or anything else. So the method that I came up with, that I used for really good success in a number of these printing blocks from my great-grandfather's shop, is to use leftover mat board. See, there's like my name on it and everything. So it's obviously from a project that I've used. I think this one was from Wajuka. You're going to put your mat board in the back of your printing block. If I cannot drop you here. And you want it smaller than whatever you're framing. So the smaller your printing block, the more complicated this is going to be. And I've done it on very small printing blocks. And I did it for the tools that I framed previously as well. And that was particularly challenging because the tools were round. And trying to attach it in was quite difficult. But the key is to put the acid-free mat board on here. I'm not worried about this. I think that's like flecks of paint from when we painted the house. It's not going to be touching the actual block of wood. So it should be fine. So mat board goes on in the center. Any old fishing line you got. I forgot scissors. Don't worry too much about where you put the fishing line in the front, because it's fishing line. It's pretty much invisible. If somebody's looking at your work and is fussing about fishing line showing when you've done preservation quality work, they got their own set of problems. I mean, it'd be different if you're doing this professionally and your client is incredibly exacting. I've certainly had people like that, but most of the time, nobody is going to fuss about seeing a fishing line because the light's got to hit it just right. Professional framers absolutely use it to hang a wide variety of things. They don't always go and buy the different mounts that you can get. There's bottle mounts, gun mounts, knife mounts, sword mounts. I mean, you name it. There's different kinds of little clear plastic mounts, like ones for rings. They're not always going to go and buy that. Sometimes fishing line is just the answer. And when you're doing it for yourself, because we don't all got the money to be going out and buying specialty stuff to frame stuff. Which, you know, it's okay to go ahead and use the fishing line. it's cool. Done it in professional settings, no problem. So you just knot the hell out of this. Make sure it's nice and tight. And then because you're too lazy to actually get the scissors, you use an X-Acto knife. Because you're in the art room and you only have sewing scissors and you're not going to use sewing scissors on fishing line. You can come back and clean the little pieces up. And you're going to want to put it at least at, because this one is so big, 2 spots, I would say. Good. I'm being aggressive, and that's cool because his fishing line is not going to break. And we want this nice and tight. We're not worried about the printing block breaking. Just not going to happen. It's a chunk of wood with a piece of metal on it, so not terribly delicate. We just don't want it acid or anything else to corrode it over time. Just want to cut those short enough that they're not going to stick out from underneath. Okay. So now it just goes in like that. And we're going to put silicone just along the mat board. And we're going to do it over the fishing line, which is super tight. Not quite as tight as my viola strings, but pretty tight. I normally just use E6000 because I have like several tubes of this and I've used it even when I shouldn't have. Like, yeah, the glass. I did say I was going to silicone that glass and totally shove this on it. That glass ain't going nowhere. Ended up having to find a pair of pliers in order to get the lid off. Stuff is pretty good. There's definitely other brands. This one is a little bit more pricey. So if it's outside of your budget and you want to do this at home, if you've got some heirlooms to frame, don't sweat it if you got to buy a different brand. There's lots of good off brands out there. The only reason I have this was because I worked at a Michael's frame shop for a while. And we were able to just kind of grab it off the floor and use it. This one's a little bit heavier, so I'm probably using way more of this than I actually need. It's pretty sturdy stuff. So glob it over the mat board. Make sure you grab the fishing line. We are just going to set it in. Make sure I have that straight. I can't do that with holding the camera. So it's finally done. I went ahead and put one hinge on. I may go and add a second one and move that one over. So So I got like one there and one there, but I'll have to see how it looks. That's not going anywhere. And for the backing system, I legit don't know if that's an actual backing system or not. I just had it in my toolbox and I'm like, yeah, screw goes in there, nail goes in there. That works. You hang it a third of the way down. Anytime you're hanging something, is a third of the way down. And then in the center, in this case. So, it's just gotta have to find a home in my hallway now. But it is done, finally.